A guten Erev Shabbos. Parshas Tzav is often read on Shabbos HaGadol, the great Shabbat, the one right before Pesach. Not always does it come on the very eve of the holiday, as it does this year. Last time was 2008. Next time is in 4 years, and the next time is 2045. It's not a very frequent convergence of the calendar. When it is actually Erev Pesach of Shabbat HaGadol, the custom is to move the quote-unquote Shabbos HaGadol drasha, the sermon that gives you insight into the laws and customs of the holiday, to move that back a week so that the message will be relevant and not too late to actually do anything about it. So that was the focus of last week's talk. So that actually allows us to focus on the idea of Tzav in its own right. Since Tzav means not only command but also connect, let's connect ourselves to the story and the stories of Pesach, the story that we are all continuing to write this year, our second year of the Seder in isolation, struggling to feel liberated and feel free when so much of our lives, including Pesach, the preparations and the celebrations, so much has had to do with restriction and limitation, which in Hebrew is Meitzarim, narrow straits, spelled the same way as Mitzrayim, the Torah's word for Egypt. Here are a few stories that you can think about between now and the Seder and even share and discuss at your own Sedarim if you like. Thinking back just a few weeks to how so many people in our Kehillah volunteered to deliver Shalach Manos for Purim, this story seemed particularly resonant. A great rabbi of Yerushalayim in the last generation, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, was known as a great scholar, a major Talmid Chacham, as well as a great Bal Chesed, someone possessed of great sensitivity and compassion toward others. One year on Erev Pesach, the eve of the Seder, there's only one in Israel, remember, he called his nephew, who was always willing to help, and asked a favor of him. His nephew realized that it must be important, otherwise why would his uncle ask him to help on one of the busiest days of the year? When this young man arrived at his uncle's house, he found a stack of envelopes with addresses for delivery to many different households in the city. Rabbi Auerbach said, "Please deliver these before Yom Tov." His nephew assumed that it was money to help with supporting the needs of Pesach, recognized some of the names, and asked if did it really have to be done today, because he himself knew that some of these families had already received help from Rabbi Auerbach himself and from various other funds that help provide for those in need. Rabbi Auerbach smiled, he had a beautiful smile, and he said in reply, "Gut Yom Tov." So his nephew understood the message, he dutifully went on his rounds, and when he delivered to one family, the recipient opened the envelope on the spot, in which he found tickets to Jerusalem's biblical zoo, the Gan HaChayot HaTanachi, and some cash for expenses there. This happened a few more times, and the nephew started to think for himself, couldn't we have done this over Chol HaMoed, on the first day of Yom Tov, after the first day of Yom Tov? Why was it so important to do on Erev Yom Tov with so many other things more pressing to worry about? So he promised himself he'd go back and ask his uncle over Chol HaMoed. When he did, Rabbi Auerbach smiled again and explained like this. He said, almost all families take their children on outings on Chol HaMoed. Imagine if these envelopes had not been delivered before Yom Tov. The children in families who didn't have something exciting planned would talk to their friends over Yom Tov about their Chol HaMoed plans, but these poorer children wouldn't have had anything to talk about. This would have led to hard feelings between the children and the parents, and as they would have felt left out. Now imagine the simcha that the parents and the children felt over Yom Tov, when they had a special family outing to look forward to over Chol HaMoed, and imagine how happy those homes, both the parents and the children, were over Yom Tov. That story seemed in its own way to echo another one that took place a few years before, right after the Second World War in Bukovina, which was in Soviet-occupied Romania. There was a great Jewish leader of the times then, named Rabbi Eliezer Zusha Portugal, known as the Skuliner Rebbe. He managed, after surviving the Holocaust, to pull together some supplies for Pesach. This is April of 1945. Imagine the shape Eastern Europe was in those times. He managed to get some flour and supervised the baking into matzahs and arranged to have them distributed to others who were there in Chernovitz. One of those who returned back in those times was Rabbi Baruch Hager, who would become the Vizhnitzer Rebbe of Haifa, and his son Moshe, who was 8 years old at the time and would grow up one day to succeed his father. So Reb Moshe told the story. He said he went as he was instructed by his father, and did what he was asked to do. He came to the school in a Rebbe and he said, "I have greetings to the Rebbe from my father, the Seret Vizhnitzer Rebbe." He asked if you could please give him matzahs for the Seder. The Skoliner was happy to see this young boy, and he answered, "Please give your father my special regards, and here are 3 matzahs for the Seder." Young Moishele thanked him and said, "My father said that I should ask you for 6 matzahs." The Skoliner Rebbe answered, "How can I give you 6? I'm giving 3 to each family, and I don't have enough to give everyone who asks more than that." This 8-year-old boy, Moishele, replied, "What can I do? My father told me that I have to come to you, and I cannot leave until you give me 6 matzahs." Uncomfortable spot. The Skoliner Rebbe knew that Rabbi Hager was a great tzaddik and was very warmly esteemed in the community, so he said, "Moishele, what can I do? Here are 6 matzahs, and please give your father my warmest regards for a Chag Kasher V'Sameach," and he sent the boy on his way with 6 matzahs. On Erev Pesach, this young Moishele returned to the Skoliner Rebbe with 3 matzahs. He handed them over, and he said, "My father said I should give the Rebbe back 3 matzahs." So the Skoliner asked with surprise, "If you're giving them back, why did he ask for them in the first place?" Moishele answered with awe and respect, saying, "My father said that the Skoliner Rebbe was so kind to everyone that he would probably give away all the matzahs to other people, and he wouldn't have 3 good ones for the Seder himself. So he asked for them in order to save them, so that the Rebbe, the Skoliner Rebbe, would have 3 perfect matzahs for the Seder." Of course, this was exactly what had taken place, and the Skoliner Rebbe made the Seder with those 3 matzahs. As we say, "Mi ka'amcha Yisrael," like it says in Sefer Shmuel Beis, "Who is like your people Israel?" A third story that seems to come up every year, and here it is again this year. A man once approached the Beis Halevi, great-grandfather of Rabbi Soloveitchik. The Beis Halevi was also named Yosef Dov, and his son, Reb Chaim, who followed him as Rav in the town of Slutsk in Belarus, said, "I do my best to respond to people's needs, but my father went further than that. He would discover on his own what people's needs were." So this story illustrates that. Once a man approached him and asked him a shaila, asked him a Pesach question, halachic question. He said, "Are we permitted to use milk to fulfill the mitzvah of the 4 cups at the Seder?" So the Rav thought about this and thought about the question, and finally, as an answer, he reached into his pocket and gave the man 20 rubles, which was far more than a person needed to buy wine for the Seder. When he got home, he explained what had happened. His wife asked him, "Why did you give this man such a large sum of money?" So the Beis Halevi answered, 2 of the 4 cups are after the Suda, after the meal, Shulchan Aruch. If this man was planning to use milk, that tells you not only he didn't have wine, but he also didn't have any meat for the Yom Tov meal either. So I gave him enough not only to buy wine, and to buy some meat to make a proper Yom Tov meal. In our days, we don't think of such poverty, but to someone that's willing to listen carefully, he heard what his neighbor was saying, and he also heard what his neighbor was not saying. Last Shabbos, we told some afikomen stories. And here's another one that probably has some lessons for our times as well. The widespread custom is for children to snatch the afikomen and hold it ransom and ask for something from the leader of the Seder so that the Seder can go on. At one particular Seder one year, the children got together and decided that whoever found the afikomen, they would jointly ask their father for one gift for all of them together. They had a special request. They would ask their father to spend 1 weeknight together with the family. This father was a prosperous businessman, busy every night except Shabbos with either his own work or community meetings or traveling out of town on business. His children missed him being around, and what they wanted most was to spend more time with their father. They wanted him to feel that they were a priority in his life, not just the business. So when he heard about this, when this happened, the father was humbled and also a little bit chastened by the requests, and he agreed. So the first Monday night after the end of Yom Tov, he came home to spend the evening with his family. Even though it was after dinner time by the time he arrived, still he gathered his children around and he said he wanted to talk to them. The children were very excited and they asked, so you'll be eating dinner with us from now on once a week? And the father said, no, something even better. Twice a week? I couldn't imagine what would be better. Two times a week, they asked. He said, even better than that. I have something very special for you. And with a great big tararam, a big production, he presented each child with something very special. Each kid got their very own laptop computer. The children smiled sort of half-heartedly and said, thanks for your thoughtfulness. And later that night, his wife approached him with tears in her eyes, and she said, they don't want laptops, they want you. Rabbi Pesach Kron, who's a very popular speaker and who compiled these stories, once asked a great Jewish educator, Reb Shlomo Volbe, what message he should disseminate to the Jewish world with regard to parents raising children. He said the answer was, tell every parent that the two things they should give their children are time and love. The person was overhearing this conversation and asked, how much? Rabbi Volbe's answer was, as much as they need. Probably the best afikomen present anyone could receive. Now, many of us, but not all of us, are blessed with children. For those of us so fortunate, it's highly likely that this year, as last year, we will not be sitting all around the table for the Seder with the generations as we might like to be. Much is not the way we want it to be or the way we would like it to be. However, all of us are somebody's children, and without a doubt, all of us are God's children. While it is certainly nice and altogether fitting and proper, our obligation, our sacred trust to serve Hashem and carry out the mitzvahs with joy and seriousness of purpose, if you really want to be nice to someone, the nicest thing you can do is to be genuinely interested in and care about their children. These stories all illustrate this, the care and compassion and concern and empathy with and for the feelings of others, all of us, God's children. When we do something nice for someone else, when we consider their feelings, when we step into their shoes for a moment, in that process, we also do a great kindness and show love and concern for Avinu Shebashamayim, for our Father in heaven. The last story is particularly poignant because in place of family, friends, hospitality, connection, and togetherness at the holidays, which we all so much want and need, we've been given the beautiful gift of laptop computers. Gee, thanks, Dad. That was really nice of you. Now, think for a moment what the past year would have been like had we not had computers, had we not had Zoom, had we not even had telephones, which is the way it was 100 years ago. The isolation that we're all feeling would have been immeasurably worse. Thankfully, we do have what we have, but still, it's not enough. We would like to spend more time with each other, more time with our Father, with Avinu Shebashamayim. So may this festival of freedom bring us and fulfill for us the promise of more freedom, liberation from the worries and anxieties and fear that have been our plagues for this whole year, and see us all come together in the very near future in good health, in simcha, and in peace. Good Shabbos, good Yom Tov, Chag Kosher V'Sameach.